They probably look at that podcast and they're like, this looks like you could say that, but we're making $100K a month on the Patreon.
You were making a choice to pursue a passion over something much more stable.
I've always gambled on like a lot of like serious stuff.
Making minimum wage to part owner of a successful podcast.
Partying has propelled my career more than anything else.
Will Neff, Hasan's, like Valkyrae, I feel like you're like their secret weapon.
The way I started my career is just say yes to everything.
Is there anything that you would have done differently? Marche quit community college to work minimum wage at a gaming center so he could borrow computer time and stream a dying video game. Those life choices led to today, where Marche is the hidden boss of Twitch. He co-owns and produces the Fear and podcast with Hasan, Will Neff, Cutie Cinderella, and Austin Show, and shoots content for Valkyrae. Today in the Karat podcast, Marche shares how to take massively risky bets on yourself that pay off, why partying can help your career, and how to find meaning in life when you're feeling down. So Marche, thank you so much for joining us. Marche is co-owner of the Fear and podcast with Will Neff, Hasan, Austin, and Cutie Cinderella. You also partner with Valkyrae to lead her content.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How does it feel? Increasingly, you are now a personality yourself in front of the camera instead of helping set it up.
Am I? I guess I'm just learning that in real time right now. It feels... I'm just kidding. No, it's honestly a little bit intentional. I do obviously exist behind the camera mainly, but some people might actually know that I got my start in this whole space as a streamer myself. So I'm very comfortable in front of the camera too. So I like to dip my toes back and forth. And I've spent like the past maybe 3-4 years primarily behind the camera with my time at 100 Thieves, and then working with Ray, and now the podcast. And I feel like, at this point, it'd be kind of silly for me to spend all my time behind the camera since I already have a bit of like a foundation and audience from the old days that are there. Also, I feel very fortunate to work for a couple people, primarily Ray and Hasan and Will and stuff, who are
love Will was thrown in there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like Will also, I guess.
Who like are no stranger and actually like are very good about like building me up and putting me like in front of camera often. I know a lot of streamers will be kind of weird about that. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, I don't want like this production person that works with me to like be on screen with me, or like they hold like their content or their circle of like influence very close to the chest, which is understandable. Whereas I with people like Ray and Hasan, it's been the complete opposite. I've never once like asked them to like put me on their stream or like credit me, but Ray has always been like amazing about like crediting me whenever I do content for her, or like she'll just throw me on stream and like whenever I'm like helping her build like a live stream, and like for some reason she like needs assistance, she's like, come help, like be a part of this community. And like through that exposure, I'm just like, oh, it feels really nice that like they're not afraid to kind of like toss some of their audience eyeballs my way too, if it like just makes sense and is organic.
Also, I've seen streams where I think you took over, or you were on camera on one of Ray's streams for like 5 seconds, and she came back and they're like, why are they all barking at you? Yeah. They get crumbs of Mauricio and they're just going nuts. Or I know some of the streams where you've taken over for Hasan are fan favorites as well.
Yeah.
I saw a comment, a video asking, can we just get a new Marche so old Marche can go and just talk?
Spending time with like their audiences, like, and because I'm a consumer of live streams. I was going to say Twitch, but like Ray's on YouTube, obviously. So, and honestly, just live streams in general. I'm a consumer too. So I feel like as somebody who started as a streamer myself for a handful of years and then transitioned into helping build the content for the streamers, it helps me kind of create it through the eyeballs of both a viewer and a streamer. I can kind of like very specifically tailor like the content and the way I kind of am involved in it to what I think like a viewer would want the most, which helps with me with like communicating with their audiences, even if it's as simple as like I'm just holding Hasan's IRL stream backpack while we go and like travel, or he does an IRL stream. And it's like a lot of that is going to consist of Hasan being several feet away doing some activity, and I'm right next to the microphone, essentially holding the broadcast, communicating with them. And I could just like be completely silent, like cameraman, which would be totally fine. But I feel like it helps in a lot of times when it makes sense, like the chat experience, to just like chat with the chat as a chat or
like
viewing
a normal person.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Hey, we're friends. I'm helping you.
Yeah, exactly.
But what's unique is not only are you not the silent cameraman, like you're a personality yourself, you're also, from a capitalistic perspective, you're co-owner of the podcast itself with equal shares.
Yes. Yes.
How did that conversation come about? How do you go saying, hey, Mr. Streamer personality with millions of followers, I deserve just as much of what we're producing together here as you do?
So that is not how that conversation happened at all, actually. So basically, if anybody familiar, it's funny that you say like from a capitalistic perspective, because that's very true, but like basically anybody familiar with like Hasan's politics in particular is that he's like very socialist, very all about like empowering workers rights, and stuff like that. So he's obviously got this like super successful business of his own. He's not financially motivated at all. Like he doesn't give a like he obviously is a gajillionaire because his stream is popping off and stuff, but like he doesn't like, he's not just trying to min-max his like margins and stuff. So when Will and Hasan approached me with this project because of my relationship with Will, which I can get into, when they approached me with it, right off the rip, that was the offer. Basically, Will was like, hey, would you come produce this podcast? We know you have some experience producing podcasts because of your work at 100 Thieves, and we'll just split everything 3 ways. Hasan wants it that way. It's actually like one by design, but also in retrospect, like Hasan is really happy that that's the layout, because he said to me, like even just off camera, there have been times where he likes that his producer, like his production person, his cameraman, whatever you want to call me, is taking like first class flights right alongside the streamers from like a TwitchCon or like TwitchCon EU or something. Or like he can say that like, oh yeah, my producer is like one of the highest paid producers, because like it further is just kind of him speaking truth to power and like really practicing what he preaches when he says like, I want to empower workers. I want workers to feel like they are invested in something that they're also building. Because I mean, the reality of the situation is I do get paid more than most podcast producers, because like I get a 33% rev share straight up, which empowers me too, to just like see direct returns on what I'm building.
What's incredible too is you're coming to this situation from 100 Thieves, where you're a cog in the machine, where there's the talent team and there's the technical team. Yeah. And if you're on the technical team, I remember you said previously, they didn't even want you interacting with talent.
Yes. Yeah. That's I mean, essentially, yes. Like, I'm not saying that they don't want me to interact with talent at all is a bit like, it's a bit harsh. It wasn't like that cut and dry. It wasn't like, don't look at talent, don't talk to them. But I was definitely like discouraged from like building any like meaningful relationships with them. I think it wasn't even just like it wasn't like a malicious like reason, or like it wasn't them like wanting to try to like keep me down. I think a lot of it, at least the way I analyze it, was like my peers, both like my managers and like even coworkers, were a bit kind of insecure or envious of the fact that I was able to very organically build these relationships with talent, and it was reciprocated. It wasn't just like, hey, I'm clearly trying to like, get close to this talent because they're a famous person or something. I think it comes from my background as a streamer, and I'm like solo psychoanalyzing right now. But that whenever I see talent on set, like primarily streamers and YouTubers, which is what our talent at 100 Thieves was mainly comprised of, I don't see them as these mythical creatures that are unapproachable, that are like, I obviously, know that they're big deals, obviously, but I'm not afraid to just like approach them. In fact, in a lot of ways, I kind of see them as like people that I've like interacted with in the past, in my tenure as a streamer primarily. And I think because I'm able to speak that language, like of live streaming and Twitch and the whole ecosystem, if somebody knows how to speak that language, it's very apparent off rip. And because of that, the talent were more comfortable around me to begin with. And a symptom of that was that my like coworkers and peers and managers would be like, why is he like doing this? Yeah. And they would almost like try to discourage that behavior, be like, just be a cog in the machine. So I get it. Like, I don't like take it personally, but it's also like, I wasn't going to listen to them,
When you were at 100 Thieves, you were asked to produce the podcast. Mm-hmm. Had you produced a podcast before?
No.
You had never produced a podcast.
No.
You're called in to do this for like Nadeshot and Courage. Like, what happens? How do you learn? You just
So I wasn't the head producer on it. Thankfully, they were like, we have this producer. I was basically PAing for him at the time. But what that realistically was, or PAing for 100 Thieves, but like what that realistically was I was kind of like helping him produce it, because like he'd be like overall producer, and then I would kind of just help build the actual set. And in those moments I would learn about like setting up lights, setting up cameras, recording and stuff. So I had somebody who was like overseeing, but I was directly producing alongside with them. And so that's how that happened. And then a lot of it was just moments of like being self-taught, asking a lot of questions, stuff like that.
And now you mentioned a lot of times when producing the Fear and podcast, you leave organic moments in. I saw the first episode. I know that Will and Hasan had their Fear and Malding podcast before, where they didn't like the producer.
Cast Media.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Brought it back as Fear and.
Yeah.
The first episode, you guys were like in Europe on a boat.
Yeah, that was crazy.
What happened?
Yeah.
Like, for those of you, go watch the episode. It's like Marche producing a podcast, like 7 people in various states of sobriety.
Yeah.
And like some are like sitting with a microphone, some are like lying on the ground. It's like Carl Jacobs, like I think George Not Found.
Yeah.
Will, Hasan, Austin.
Pokemon.
You guys are on a boat.
Yeah.
It like turns dark halfway through. How did this happen? First episode.
So there's definitely a bit of a story, and it comes back to the whole like being insecure, but then like rising to the challenge thing. The way this all started was, just to get back up and give a little more context, I mentioned that with most talent, I treat them like humans. I don't really necessarily get starstruck. Like they're not these unicorns. However, specifically with Hasan, I've been like a huge fan of his. I found him at the start of COVID 2020, and because I was locked in, I probably just had his stream on like every single day.
So before he blew up,
yeah,
you knew.
When he was like a 5K Andy, he was already kind of on his way, but like, yeah, for sure. And so it's funny because even further back at the 100 Thieves like life, when they were like, don't be involved with talent, I actually made these 2 write-ups about Ludwig and Hasan when they were both like 3 to 5K Andys. I was like, sign this talent. Like,
and
they're up next.
They didn't.
They did not do
Why didn't they listen to you?
I don't know, man. But like, anyway, we can get into that later. But like, so I was a huge Hasanabi head, was a massive fan all throughout COVID. Restrictions started loosening up a bit. I became homies with Will, and then and with Austin actually through 100 Thieves because they both worked there. And so I obviously knew who they were because of Hasan's stream, because they were like, part of the Hasanabi universe. And so Hasan was definitely this like person that I was starstruck around. And so I got to like meet him once at the compound for an event, and I like asked for a picture, and I basically never have done that. And so I was like super awkward, and he's like notoriously very awkward when meeting fans too. So like I was like insecure. It was bad. I was like, oh, this guy hates me.
Can I get a photo?
Yeah, it was bad. Fast forward to Will being like, produce this show for us. And I was like, yes, I'll do it. But I was also terrified because I was like, I'm now doing it for my favorite streamer. I don't want to this up. I don't even know if I'm capable of doing this by myself. I remember still like doing the initial site walkthrough, which is just his house, for his like studio that he had built, which was just his stream room. And I was like, yeah. And I thought Will would be there to liaison a bit, but Will dropped out. So picture me like super like insecure showing up to Hasan's house alone, being like, hey, I'm just going to come be all up in your and like look for stuff. Sorry, please don't hate me. And then, so anyway, so contextually, that's where we're at. So Hasan is like, hey, we're going to, actually, no, Austin was like, hey, I'm going to go to the UK to do this flight simulator stream. And so, and Austin was like, I want somebody to IRL stream this and produce it. And because I had worked with Austin on like Cash App trivia and stuff at 100 Thieves, he was like, he tapped into me. And I was like, yes. And at this point, I'd already been tapped in to do Fear and, but hadn't existed yet. So we were just laying the groundwork. Or I was just laying the groundwork, like planning and stuff. And this UK flight simulator stream was right before, like the week before, TwitchCon EU in Amsterdam. And so Hasan, Will, Austin were all going to TwitchCon EU. And so Austin was like, I'll fly you out to UK to do this flight simulator stream, and then we'll go to TwitchCon EU, and then you can like help Hasan with content. Because there had already been talks of me being the guy to do that with Hasan. Hasan and I still like low comms at this point. he's kind of awkward. I realize now in hindsight, he's a super nice guy. He's a teddy bear. He's just kind of acoustic, but like he's just bad at socializing and meeting people. And like, this is a reoccurring thing. But so all the while I'm like, this guy hates me. He like flew me out. He like thinks I'm like dead weight here. I'm failing at this. And so we go through the UK leg of the trip. The stream with Austin goes great. We go to Amsterdam. We have no real plan for a podcast yet. Nothing's really coming out of it. Like, there's been a couple IRL streams that have worked out, but like, we're supposed to shoot our first episode. We're supposed to shoot a promo for the podcast. That didn't happen because scheduling with them is horrible. And then we gotta shoot an episode. We gotta shoot an episode literally like in the final day. It's starting to look like this is just not happening.
So this is like the last day you're all together.
I filmed that and then packed everything up and got on a flight like 12 hours later. Like 8 to 12 hours later. Yeah. Wow. Back to LA after being in Europe for like a week and a half.
They just couldn't make their schedules work.
Basically, yeah.
And I assume Will's probably like, guys, like, are we going to shoot this?
Not really. Like, okay. If anything, like, streamers are just like, they're all just so busy in their own world. Like, and it sucks because like, it is definitely at that point my job to rally Hasan and Will and any guests that are at TwitchCon that would want to be on our podcast. However, it's hard to like interject and be this like assertive voice of like, you have to do this or we have to do this, when like, one, I'm already so intimidated by Hasan to begin with, but also because like I'm like the new blood, you know. I don't want to just like be like, hey, you guys can't do the things you're gonna do, we have to do this as priority. So it was just rough. But basically, I remember spending the last day we were at TwitchCon in the morning calling multiple people the day before, Hasan had posted on his Insta story, hey, we need a location to shoot this podcast that we want to do. If anybody is in Amsterdam area and has a spot for us, DM my agent. So I was on calls with his agent, like sourcing like a
David
few...
Hunsinger?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sourcing a few locations, and then calling each of those locations through like WhatsApp and like European numbers and broken English, like trying to find a spot for us. I find this guy who's a Hasanabi head who's like, hey, I have this music studio that we sometimes shoot podcasts on, and it's on a boathouse on the canals. And I was like, this sounds perfect. And he was like, also, if like Hasan and all of them would want to do like a boat tour through the canals, we could IRL stream that too. And I was like, this is perfect. So I spent like the last like day scheduling all of that. Like, I was like, I don't know what happened. Like, something like just clicked in my brain, and I was like, I don't care. Like, I'm not leaving Europe without doing something.
I
have to do this. So I was really like, at that point, I did become assertive with like Hasan and Will, and I was like, who do you want to bring on this boat tour? It's gonna be sick, and then we'll film the podcast after. We'll all do it all in one go. I'm gonna go by myself to scout out this boat ahead of time, set up everything ahead of time. So all you have to do is just, the boat will pick you up from the docks at TwitchCon. We'll IRL stream this boat tour through all the canals, and then it'll drop us off at the boathouse where everything will be ready for us to sit in and record. And I made all of that happen in like a 24-hour turnaround from start to finish. And then I remember, and trust me, I was like in the just an adrenaline filled like state where I was just like kind of, I don't know, it was kind of a blur. And then finally everything was recorded and said and done, and it was good. And I remember we were kind of like in this, we were in the boathouse just like having food after the fact, like all the cameras were off. And I was still just like packing up, and I was like still like high off the adrenaline. I was like, this is crazy that this is happening. And then Hasan was like, Marche, like, you know, in the final hour, you really just like made, he really said, he was like, in the final hour, like you showed up and delivered better than I could have ever imagined. And it made me feel like so happy. I was like, damn, holy maybe I can do this. And then so I was like, I probably didn't say that in the moment. I was like, haha, thanks. And then I ran away, and then I went back to my hotel room and then like started uploading all the footage. And I was like, all right, now I got to get this episode out tomorrow and like figure out what our socials look like and like the marketing rollout for this and all this. There was like very little time for me to actually rest and take it all in. But then I look back on that, and it's like still such a vivid memory in my brain. And I'm like, wow. I mean, yeah, if you look back at that episode, it was crazy. We're like on a canal or on a boat in the canals of Amsterdam shooting a podcast.
I can literally hear you reliving this experience, processing it.
Yeah.
I just picture Hasan being like, you came through.
Yeah.
And you can't even handle that yet.
Yeah.
You're like still in work mode. You're just like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, I need to like go upload, because like when I watched this episode, I actually was like, wait, was this the first episode? You already had like an intro.
There was none at the time. When Will approached me at a party and was like, hey, come do Fear End, because this was at a party that he approached me and
How
did that.
sober were you guys?
Probably not very. But I was like, yeah. When he approached me, he made it sound like he's like, Hasan has a studio in his house. Just show up and shoot it. It'll be easy. We'll do it. And I was like, yeah. That was not what that was at all. What he meant was like, do everything top to bottom. I don't think he even realized. Because I try to like reinforce to them. It's like, I don't want this to be like stressful or heavy lift for you guys. I want this to be something that you guys can
just show up on the boat.
Just show up. Exactly. Like, I want to make it as hands off for them as possible. Just to make it like just fun and stress free for them. And I'll handle all the hard stuff. What I realized the hard stuff meant was like the publishing, the community, the titling, the thumbnailing, everything. Like there's so much that goes in like the podcast uploading to audio platforms. I mean, you know. And so, and also usually, as you also know, there are entire teams dedicated to this. Like when I was at 100 Thieves and we were doing Courage Nadeshot Show, we had a thumbnail artist, a graphics person, a publishing person, like a producer, 3 shooters, an audio guy. It's like we had all these things. Like I just became all of those people. But so there was like a month or two of like building the foundation leading up to that episode. And in that time, I had a lot of time to think about what I wanted like the branding of the show to look like and what I wanted just the vibe of the show to be. And so going back to where this tangent came from when you talked about the intro, specifically, I wanted this like surrealism sort of like vibe where our branding exists in the real world, but it isn't always necessarily like the focal point. And I got that inspiration heavily from, there's a show called Atlanta that's made,
Donald Glover, Childish Gambino.
Yeah. And so he, in the promos, in the promos for that show before it even launched, there were these really cool like promos / trailers that they put out where it was filmed in such a way that like the 3 main characters or sometimes the 1 main character would be doing everything would be doing everything forwards, and everything else in the world was practically shot and going
like a
backwards.
Like state.
Yeah, and it was all going backwards, and it was shot by him doing everything backwards, and then it was played in backwards.
That's cool.
And so if you look at our intros, everything is happening backwards. The cars are driving backwards, people are walking backwards, the raindrops fall, and it's like that's heavily inspired by that. But I wanted this like really hyper surrealist sort of like vibe. Even just like our banner right now on Twitter is like the Amsterdam Canal, but it's like our logo graffitied off to the side. Like just like it's not even like the main point of it, but it just like exists there.
I remember the first time I watched the intro, it's like I'm like in a fugue state.
Yeah, that
like,
was
this is what it's like to be on drugs.
Yeah, I mean like it was just so it was just more so like my brainchild coming to life.
But like that's what matters, having a distinct POV versus like, oh, here's like our podcast, here's like a jingle. You're like, oh, I watch it. You're like immersed in this world. And I still love that first episode because to your point on not cutting it, wanting to keep it real, the first 5 minutes of the pod is just like Hasan ordering food on his phone.
Yeah, and we still do that to this day.
And Will like trying to do an intro, being like, all right, what the man? Like, you're ordering food, like, let me do this again. And Carl Jacobs being like, are we rolling?
Yeah.
Are we rolling?
That has stayed consistent through to even
but
our most
it makes
recent
it feel, I mean, right, like in the streamer world we call it scuffed, but scuffed isn't a bad thing.
Absolutely not.
Scuffed is like, in some ways it's a good thing.
Yes.
We talked a lot about like how 100 Thieves, or like when I say Instagram, you are a cog in the machine. There's like things you should be doing, things you shouldn't be doing, versus in this whole like streamer YouTube world, you kind of just do it all yourself. And because of that, you get just to be way more real.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm going to keep the parts where we're talking about holy shit, like, let's get this podcast started because I'm actually making this and it's me and I'm a co-owner.
Yes. And I mean, you completely nailed it by the way you described that, because like, for sure. And it all comes back to, I think, just my start as a streamer where it's all self-produced. There's a lot of scuff, but it's in those moments of scuff that you find the most like genuine little nuggets of like things that your audience can latch on to. Like some of the most funny reoccurring bits on our show are when like the camera angles are being adjusted or when the mic's being broken or like just whatever scuff thing happens because it just feels real. And that's something that if you look at the pattern of my career, or sorry, the trajectory of my career, I went from streamer to traditional production at 100 Thieves back to like my own production. And so it was in that gap of like, or in that period of like traditional production at 100 Thieves where I was like literally tearing my hair out constantly, where I was like, we're doing content around streamers. The audience is streamer audiences that we're pandering to and catering to because our talent is all streamers. And yet no one in this production understands that scuff can be a good thing. Yes. That can, I mean, look at like an OTK who are killing it. And a lot of the productions are up.
Yeah.
Like they're well produced, but like a lot of it is just chaos.
Some of the best moments I had of this podcast, I went and took this entire setup literally by myself in 2 suitcases to VidCon Baltimore and New York. And it was just me, and I shot it by myself, and those pots did great.
That's crazy that you did that, because I do that whenever I travel. Actually, when we were in Vegas, I shot.
Oh yeah, that was pretty recent, like a month ago.
Yeah, I shot, I did the same thing. Entire travel case, I shot it all in a hotel room, and you can actually see in the reflection of the hotel window, me going from camera to camera to camera, like periodically checking, like, we still rolling?
Like we just did.
Yeah, we still rolling, like checking the audio, like making sure. Like, you'll see me walking back and forth. And it's funny because like normally in a production, in a film production, TV production, at 100 Thieves production, the idea of being able to see all the cameras in the reflection of the hotel window would probably be like a no-go.
Be bad.
But I promise you, like half the comments are like, seeing Marche and Andre sitting in the background laughing and walking and him checking the cameras is awesome. Like, it's so funny. Like, I love it because it feels like genuine, and doesn't matter if it's a little scuff, but it's like,
I think like the biggest thing, and this is like why like Hasan and Will, so many are so successful, is like your audience feels like, oh, it's the same thing you said earlier, but what you're so good at, like they're just human beings.
Yeah.
Versus trying to, like you said, 100 Thieves, it's like so much professionalism and layers.
Yeah.
What motivated you to start initially?
Yeah, so has it been 10 years? I think it has, dude. I went live yesterday, and somebody, because I have like OG like fans that have like never dropped their sub on Twitch for me.
10 years.
And I don't know if it's 10, somebody subbed last night and they were a 79-month streak sub. So what's that? Is that 10 years?
It's like almost 7 years. That's over six, it's like 6.5 years.
And then it was another like year and a half before that, before I even got partnered on Twitch. So yeah, incredible. I'd say like close to 10, like 8 years is like realistic.
I mean, that's like a second grader in school. Your streaming career.
Holy
it's like a child becoming a teenager.
Yeah. And to answer your question about what motivated me to start, I mean, if you go back to that time, I was 18-ish. I've always been a gamer. And I grew up playing like a bunch of console games and then PC games. When I was like 10 years old, I played this game called Ragnarok Online, which is like my first MMO, and then played World of Warcraft and all that stuff. But all that eventually culminated in like me playing League of Legends when I was like in high school. And I was always very competitive when it came to online gaming. So in WoW, I PvP'd a bunch, did a bunch of arena, and then League of Legends, PvP'd a bunch. And I back then Twitch wasn't even a thing, and I didn't know about streaming. I didn't want to be a YouTuber or anything like that. I just wanted to be a pro gamer. That's all
you wanted to compete. You wanted to win.
Yeah, exactly. And then so I tested out of high school a year early, convinced my parents that was a smart decision, even though they were super not cool with it. And I was like, oh, I'll just go to community college and get a head start on my credits, and I'll like transfer and stuff. Dropped out of community college like half a semester in. I went to like a local LAN center in my hometown, which is here in a suburb of LA. And then that's where I met one of my best friends and started working there. And then eventually like got burnt out on League of Legends. And I was like, hey, I'm going to play this other game that I got early alpha access to, which is Heroes of the Storm. It's like Blizzard's League of Legends, basically. Twitch was like in the peripheral. And I was like, well, no one has access to this game, so I should live stream it because it's probably easy views because people want to see this new hot game, right? And that's how streaming started. But even in the early days of my streaming career, I was never like, I'm doing this to stream. I'm doing this to become a pro gamer, a pro MOBA player in Heroes of the Storm. And it wasn't until like maybe like a year into the streaming that like that priority shifted, and I was like, oh, there's way more money in content creation, especially for this game, because this is a small ass MOBA and the prize pools are small. Busting my ass to be the best at this game just for like a measly prize pool when I could just be building my own brand. It just seems like silly. It seems like an obvious choice to just focus on streaming. And to kind of back up even further, it's like I would stream from the LAN center I worked at because I didn't even have a PC good enough to stream from home or hardly game. So I would work these like 8-hour minimum wage shifts. And then
you're making what, like $9, $10
yeah, like
$9
an hour. I think back then it was actually like $8.25 an hour. And then like my boss would intentionally keep us all part-time because like, you know, and then and so I'd be walking home with like $400 per paycheck. And anyway, but I'd be like close up shop and then I would just stream all night and play all night and game all night.
Wow. So you go to the LAN center, you spend all day working there, you're $90 just so you can come back and use a computer there to stream and play games on those computers.
Yeah. And then like, what made it even worse is like my boss was like super, like he would like discourage this behavior too. He would try to get me to pay for time on the PCs, even though like I wasn't like taking a seat that was used or anything. Like it literally cost him nothing to let me do it. And so I would actually not only stream from there, but I'd sneak around and stream from there. I would like steal money or steal time on the computers at the LAN center that I worked at because my boss would want me to pay what little money he gave me for working there back into the LAN center. And I was like, not going to do that. And then I think I was actually probably pretty vocal about this on my stream. I can't remember. It's so long ago. But eventually, thankfully, thanks to like a community that like ended up forming in that games community that was very supportive, they provided me enough like monetary support to get my own computer, stream from home. Eventually down the line, like quit my job, move out of my parents' house. Like I survived from like 18 to 23 exclusively off live streaming. And that was like me quitting my job, moving out of my parents' house, moving to Los Angeles. I mean, I was already in Los Angeles, but moving to like Santa Monica, like LA. And then, it just got me to the next phase of my life, basically.
You mentioned before, right? Like Hasan isn't really motivated by money. And I'm hearing you spent 5 years of your existence to date, which is like basically a fifth of how long you've been on planet Earth making
Yeah.
And now, sure, you're a part owner of a successful podcast that has like over 1 million subscribers on Patreon. You actually make money.
Yeah.
How does that feel? What has that changed?
It's definitely a new thing. Like I like to joke that it's not even a joke. The reality is like I've only had money for like a year. And like,
that's when the podcast sort of restarted.
Like a year and change now. When that's like specifically when the Patreon started. And like the Patreon didn't start making money overnight. Like it was like a couple months before I was like, oh, okay, this is like a little bit of income. Meanwhile, I mean, don't get me wrong, like 100 Thieves like paid me like a good salary, and then like Ray's also paid me very well. But this is like the difference between having to budget well and like, oh, I can, not worry about money.
I don't need to think about what I'm spending every day versus having $400 in your wallet.
And like as far as how it feels, I've also never been like a super frugal person. I don't know where that comes from. And like I've also never been very financially motivated. So it feels great, obviously. It feels like the relief, it provides a lot of relief just in my day-to-day. But I feel like my lifestyle didn't change too much. I was quite literally like living with like $100 in my bank account like 2 years ago because I would just like not be frugal and not save money or anything. And I'm like, oh, okay, it all worked out.
That's so fascinating.
I'm just gambling on my future. I'm like, I could.
So like in a way, this is amazing. You're like, well, having money hasn't changed me because I was spending like I had money even when I didn't have it.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And you mentioned like you were not primarily financially motivated because if you were, you probably wouldn't have dropped out of school to stream trying to get time at a LAN center.
Yeah.
Walk me through your thought process. So you're precocious. You skipped your last year of high school.
Mm-hmm. What does that word mean?
You're just really, really smart at a young age.
Yes. Yes. Totally.
Exactly.
100%.
As we can clearly tell.
Yes.
And how did this occur? Because like when I was in high school, first of all, I was a huge nerd. I also played a lot of video games. For me, Super Smash Brothers Melee. And I never thought I'd be pro, but like I wanted, if there was a job where I could play it all day, I would have taken it.
Yeah.
But I never had a chance to where they're like, hey man, do you just like want to skip high school? So how did this situation even happen?
I think what happened was the rise of esports in the West played a huge role in that. It was kind of just like, as I was having like my very formative years in my adolescence, that I really started thinking about like, what am I passionate about? What do I love the most more than anything? And also when you're a kid, like you think bigger, you think less pragmatically, like you're a lot more able to dream, I guess. And so when I was like playing League, I was literally 14 in high school, you know, and I see these like orgs like TSM and Cloud9 like playing professional League of Legends, and like just so cool to me. I'm like, wow, these people are like literally pro players, getting paid to play this game because they're just the best. It's so cool. And like their lifestyles seem like so fun and flashy. It's just like a lot of like camaraderie with like teammates and like just like doing whatever you want, getting paid to play games. So I was like, that kind of became my North Star, I think, pretty organically through just like being involved in those communities. And then I think I was just crazy enough to gamble on like trying it. Like I didn't go pro in a game, obviously, but I was like, there's something here. Like there's community building here. There's money being like pointed in this direction that like somehow I'll get a piece of it. Whether that be like, I'm going to go work at a game studio as like an assistant somewhere, or I'm going to like be a team manager for like a Cloud9 or something. Like there's just something that will happen that I can like find my way in, where I can like at least have a job in a sphere that I'm passionate about. That something like that's something I can go to college for yet. I mean, nowadays obviously colleges have like esports programs and stuff, but like that was not a thing when I was like.
So you're taking this bet on yourself. You're like, this is huge. I want to be a part of it. I'm going to find a way to make this work.
Yeah.
Enough to drop out of school. Were you aware of how risky this was, that you were making a choice to pursue a passion over something much more stable? Or was this just like in the moment, you're kind of like, I don't know, like college isn't just for me. Like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was aware of how risky it was, but I mean, I wish I had a better answer, but I think the reality of the situation is like, I have just always been a risk taker. Like I've always been like I've always gambled on like a lot of like serious stuff, like very effortlessly, like my future and like that. And I don't know if that's because of like a more nihilistic like mindset that I might have had back then, or like just because I believed in myself so much, it doesn't feel that way. Like I definitely didn't feel that way at the time, but I've always just been like, it'll work out. Like if I just like try my best and like take this chance, like I will find a way to make it work. And I think it might just be because up until that point, that's been the case. Like I've always just kind of trusted myself, and it's always had like returns in the way that I want. And so I've learned to just trust myself more and more and more over time. And that's kind of like been a consistent theme in my life, even up until like recently.
Have you made gambles that did not work out?
Yes, definitely. It's funny because like retroactively, it's easy to look back and be like, I see how everything contributed to getting me to where I am right now, every single step. But in the moment, there were some really tough like years for sure. Like working at that LAN center, at first it was like this cool job that like allowed me kind of to have like exist somewhat in the space that I care about, like gaming
on the
and stuff.
Periphery. Like you are a minimum wage employee where people rent computers.
Yeah, exactly. But like, and then after a while it became like really soul crushing and I felt lost and stuff. And then like streaming was like, it's like streaming eventually like started to take off a little bit for me. So that like ended up helping me out. And then I gambled entirely on Heroes of the Storm as like my main game to invest all of my content into. Wow. Like I was like literally boxed myself into this one community where like I would live stream this game and I get a few hundred viewers and like have my core community. And then if I did anything else, like nobody would watch it. And then Heroes of the Storm, like Blizzard, like killed that game completely. And so here I am, like just like having to completely reinvent my content and feeling like so lost for like probably over a year. And so like in that moment, there were definitely times where I was like, did I up? Like, did I just like, should I have not dropped out of college? Should I not? But like, I think I just did such a good job of like ignoring those thoughts and like focusing on like how I can make this work still, how I can pivot. That always like consumed most of like my mental capacity, that like I didn't even give it
like, I think the hardest thing to do like anything interesting in life, you often have to go through a period of time where just getting punched in the stomach repeatedly.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of like where I felt like if I don't go live right now, I can't pay rent, but this game is dead and I don't like playing it anymore. But now I'm like a slave to this. And like, that was definitely like a gut punch every time, every day for like probably like a year.
How do you get through that? Is it like, this is going to change? Or you're like, I don't know what to do? Or you said a very nihilistic POV for a while where you're just like, nothing matters. So who the cares?
It wasn't so much that. I think it was just like, I was just optimistic at that point. It wasn't even nihilism anymore. I think nihilism kind of like went away in like my early 20s. And by the time I was like in that scenario, it was actually a lot more optimism, where I was like, I have met enough people doing this and I am existing enough in this space that like, if I just, try my best to look for opportunity and show people that I am willing to like either learn how to do something, or I'm capable, or I'm just like somebody that's like, easy to work with, some opportunity will find its way to me. And then that is basically what happened. Yeah.
How would you describe your life philosophy now then, if not so much nihilistic anymore?
Oh, now I'm much more optimistic. Yeah. I like it, and I feel like I have been that way for a handful of years now. It's weird because like, is it optimism to think like, I don't want to like spend too much time like worrying about something or being depressed about something because like I could just die in an elevator tomorrow, And so like, but it's like, I'm using that as like a reason to be optimistic and like try to min-max life experience.
So I get it. You're kind of like, this could all go away anyways.
Yeah.
So I might as well make the most out of it.
Yeah.
Although I will say, Marche, very specific.
Yeah.
Dying in an elevator.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I better go network harder and hustle harder.
Yeah.
From where we're describing you, land center employee, like making minimum wage, to where you are now, a lot of it has been through relationship building.
Yes.
Relationship building with your coworker at the land center is what eventually got you to 100 Thieves.
Yes. My best friend and current roommate, Gabriel, he is I forget what his title is at 100 Thieves now. It's changed so much. But he's basically like the first employee at 100 Thieves. He's like a big deal and actually like a creative genius, an actual production nerd, unlike me, who's all self-taught. But just through like some sheer stroke of luck, like he was working at the land center in the city that I grew up in. And we became friends and just stayed connected. And when I was focusing on live streaming and doing my career doing that, he was in tandem all the while building his own esports career, like making a name for himself, making waves in the scene as like a production person. So he worked at like an org called Winter Fox originally, and then transitioned to Team Liquid, ultimately where he helped production of this company, a production company that Team Liquid owns called One Up. I don't even know if they still exist, but and then from there did such a great job that Nadeshot poached him from Team Liquid when he was like, I'm starting this brand called 100 Thieves. We need a content person to like head all of our content. Can you do that? So the first like 2 years of 100 Thieves content is almost exclusively like Gabriel's doing. Obviously he had like, shooters and like a small team, a very small team, but like all the creative direction behind the brand, all like the big videos that really launched a lot of the brand into the culture is him. All the while where he moved to Santa Monica to go work at Team Liquid. I'm still back home. I'm still doing my streaming thing. Eventually streaming is doing so well for me that I move out of my parents' house to go live with him because he's still my best friend. We still like keep in touch. The plan back then was never like, hey, you're going to come, we're going to work together in esports.
You're going to get
day.
me a job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And in fact, when I first moved in with him, he was still at Team Liquid and I was still streaming. And then 100 Thieves started happening like probably a year into us living together. And that's around the time that my stream was like becoming the gut punch. And he saw that and he was like, well, like we need somebody to help us do live streaming for our League of Legends team, our league games for our academy team at 100 Thieves, and I told them that like, you know how to do live streams because I did, and he's like, so if you want to do it, like let's do it. And so he was the one who first originally gave me that opportunity, and so that's I guess that's like that was where the optimism came from, knowing that I had enough friends that like one also believed in me, but also would like at least take a chance on me, and then a lot of the motivation came not even from believing in myself. It's gonna sound super corny, but just like not wanting to like squander the opportunity that they gave me. Like
there was like your friend sticking his neck out for you.
Exactly. Like there was so much of that where like I'm actually somebody who goes through a lot of like insecurity and self-doubt often. Like it comes in waves. And so sometimes it's really hard to trust myself, especially when externally I'm being discouraged. I'm being discouraged from like streaming at the LAN Center. I'm being discouraged from like making connections with our talent organically or like helping them out. And so it's like in those moments, it's hard for me to like believe in myself. But I think like when those opportunities do come up, it's specifically with the 100 Thieves, I was able to kind of like rise to the occasion because I was like, he vouched for me so hard that like I need to just show up for this. And then I did. And then, you know, they were still a new org. So they were like always looking for hands to be involved in new projects that they're building out. One of those being the podcast, the Courage Nadeshot Show, which they then pinged me to help build and produce. And then I did that for a while at 100 Thieves, eventually got offered a full-time job there. And it all kind of came full circle to like that being where I met Will Neff, who for a short stint, actually, towards the end of the Courage Nadeshot Show's lifespan, they started to slot Will Neff in as like a co-host of that show. And it's because I was producing that show in studio with them that Will like was like, oh, I know that he does this. And then outside of 100 Thieves, I'm tangenting so hard, I'm sorry. Outside of 100 Thieves, I had like run into Will at some parties and we had like gotten along really well. And like, and so when the opportunity came to like revive his show with Hasan, which was on hiatus, he was like, I was already top of mind. He was like, here's a cool dude who's capable.
It's incredible because I remember you sharing a lot of how you got to know Will Neff initially, and then eventually through Will Neff, also many other streamers like Hasan, you took care of his dog.
Yeah, Farley, I love that little guy. Yeah, I think it's funny because I joke with Will. In fact, I think like and was it his birthday? I think it was when we got our 100,000 subscriber plaque. And there's a clip of it somewhere on Twitch, on his stream probably. But when we got our 100,000 subscriber plaque for Fear and, I gave it to him because his YouTube channel hadn't hit 100,000 subs. And so he said he wanted it. And I was like, yeah, of course. And I also gifted him a little Prada dog collar for Farley. Because I was at this point, I was making money now. So I could afford something like that.
I could afford Prada dog collars.
Yeah.
Didn't know Prada made those.
Yeah. And so I left him I was like, here, this is for like the little demon who like made my career.
Thank you, Farley.
Yeah.
But like, okay, so I'm hearing a common strand. First, you were right. Going to that LAN Center, which most people would be like, this is going absolutely nowhere, is where you built such a meaningful relationship that this guy brought you into 100 Thieves so early.
Yeah.
And with Will, look, I understand that he was seeing you around a lot, but most people would not be able to build a genuine relationship where, cool, like you're the talent, you're coming in. Like, I'm just the guy producing in the background. Like, you want me to take care of your dog? Sure, I'll take care of your dog.
Right.
And it's almost, I'm hearing like these 2-3 sides of you. Like, number one, you're this confident gambler who takes risks. And like, you're like, it's going to work out. I'm going to own it. You mentioned you got insecure. You're getting gut punched. You're like, why am I doing this? This is going to work. And I'm here like, Marche, the master of Riz.
Yeah, maybe, I guess.
Yeah, you're like going and building these very genuine things. Because it sounds like when you see and hang out with them, like when you met Will for the first time, you're like, you're a streamer, I'm a streamer.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's sort of this fundamental level of understanding. So I'm so curious, how do you reconcile all of that? Like, so sometimes you're confident, but sometimes you're insecure. Like, what puts you into one stage or the other when you have those moments of doubt? Like, where is that coming from?
You know, I think it's a lot of things, but also I have no idea.
Yeah, like you just feel it sometimes.
Yeah,
Like,
sometimes it seems like I can like trace where that comes from, like whether it be because, you know, things haven't worked out for me, like in work this week or whatever, but sometimes it might just be like whichever way the wind blows that day, you know. I'm like, which sucks, but I've gotten better at, and like, I think my default setting is probably self-doubt and insecurity, but then I have like enough external sort of like reassurance through the things I've achieved that I can like tap into and be like, oh no, like I am capable, like this is like cool. To kind of like comment on something you did just say about like how I'm able to build these connections and like be personable with these talent. It's not even so much like when I was with Will, I was like, you're a streamer, I'm a streamer. It's more so like I show them like I'm not afraid to show like treat them like a human, I think is what it is. When like most production people, I feel like when they deal with talent, especially traditional production people, like people that are coming from like TV and film and stuff, they're like, don't even like look at the talent.
Wow. Don't
like,
even make eye contact.
Whereas I'm like not traditionally trained at all and like don't have experience on sets before this time. I've only been a streamer. So I'm just like, you're a human, I'm a human.
You're like, hey.
Yeah, like, yeah. And then I joke, and I said this before, but like I joke that like partying has propelled my career more than anything else. Any sort of like actual strong skill that I've had, because I'm somebody who very like publicly, like, I mean, they call me Billy Ravebrains on the podcast at here, and like for good reason. But I'm somebody that very publicly like likes to like socialize on the weekends, hang out, like go to parties and stuff. And it's in a lot of those environments that you can run into these talent and these people, and like whether it be like production people on the back end that are people of influence or actual talent themselves. And there's no like intention from me to like approach these people and be like, hey, I'm gonna go like make a connection or network. But it's more so like we're both having this shared experience where our walls are sort of guarded, or our walls are sort of down, and we're not as guarded. And now we're just like, you know, getting drunk at this party or at this rave together, having a fun time. And then you kind of like have that shared experience. It's a great time. And then you go back to work and you see them on set, and then you're like, you know, hey, what's up? It's good to see you, you know? And that's already like such a more meaningful connection than like, you know, just being in the same office space or something.
So you party.
Yeah.
I feel so awkward at all these events. Actually, I remember one of the first times I met you in person, we were at, was it Will Neff's birthday?
At the church one.
Yeah, it was set up in a church. It was Will Neff's birthday.
Yeah.
And I remember I was like,
awesome.
oh, you know, I'm feeling a little awkward. And you just come up and you're just like the nicest dude ever. I still remember how warm and effusive you were.
Oh.
You're like, oh, hey, Eric, it's so good to see you. And my number one thing, even though I'm so scared to go to these events, I always go because I love getting to know people. And I know if I was getting to know one person better, at least from every event, I was like, oh, like Marche is that guy. He's like, wow, what is a cool dude. Have you always felt so comfortable socializing, just hanging out with people and having a good time? Or is that something you got better at?
I think so. This is good. This is gonna seem like I'm a bad influence, and like I do not condone or recommend that anybody does the things that I've done to get to this point. However, where that confidence comes from is a lot of like adolescent like partying and drinking and like socializing and like finding like confidence through like vices, primarily alcohol. So it's like when you see me at those parties, I mean, I'm very capable of like being personable and like social, stone cold sober nowadays, but like I'm also
we're sober right now, presumably.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I'm trash. But like, but a lot of times, even today, like these days, I'll like go to one of these like big influencer parties or streamer parties, and I'll feel like pretty insecure. But I also know that like, you know, after a couple drinks, like it's easy to talk to people, and like I try not to like lean on that too much. But if I'm like feeling especially antisocial, I know that I just like after a couple of drinks I'll be fine.
I always think of alcohol
which is
as
bad.
Yeah, well, you know, all things in moderation.
Yeah.
I think of alcohol as something that, I mean, at the end of the day, it eases anxiety, which arguably, if you ease anxiety, you're just being yourself a little bit more.
Yes.
And so I'm hearing from you is you just feel a lot more comfortable.
So the other thing, the reason why I say partying, why I use that term, partying has propelled my career more than anything, is because I can hang. So that's a very key thing. So as a teenager, I went through my years where I couldn't hang, you know, where I was blacking out and puking a bunch, and I was like 16, 17. I got those out of my way. But like now in my 20s, I can get drunk with the best of them till 3 a.m, which is what happens sometimes. And I'm still like pretty coherent, having a good time. All the walls are just down and you're just like chatting, like being personable, having a good time. And it's because I'm able to like have those experiences and hang with those people and like be that fun person to party with because I can hang, that then I'm able to build a lot of meaningful connections that then come back around. And it's like, oh, like for example, with Will, I coincidentally ran into him at an Alesso show in downtown LA like 3 years ago, after we had just seen each other on set at 100 Thieves, and I'd already taken care of his dog at this point, but we weren't like super close or anything. Yeah. But I ran into him there with Myth, and I was there with another friend who was with another group of friends. Long story short, I end up like just hanging out with them. And I met them at the bar, actually. And so I immediately took shots with them randomly. And I was like, oh, hey, what's up?
We worked together.
Yeah. And then so I took shots with them. And then I was just chatting with them. We were hanging out for a while. And then one thing led to another. Before you know it, me, Myth, and Will are bar hopping until like 3 a.m. after the show.
You went hard.
And we went very hard and had an amazing time. It was super fun. And then since then, it was a difference between like before that we were just like, oh, hey, what's up? And after that, it's like, oh, we're boys now.
You're like, yo, hey. Yeah. Like last night was a movie.
Yeah, exactly. But basically, and so it's just like, and I'm obviously like embellishing and I'm joking. Like there's a lot of like effort and like stuff that went into my career. But I like to joke because I think it's funny. It's like, yeah, partying has done more for me than anything else.
Well, I always think of it as, right, opportunity is where you get lucky, but you're prepared.
Yeah.
And in a way, you're making your own luck because you're being social. There are so many people who go and meet other people at parties and nothing ever happens.
Yeah.
And you have put in work through years of being a DJ as a teenager where you know how to be comfortable and like not be shameful.
Yeah, I know how to like not make a fool of myself at a party, which is important.
That's super important. Yeah, you're still professional at work.
Yeah.
But you're also treating them like a human being. It's like this combination, like this gestalt of so many different elements. Marche's Riz.
Yeah, I guess.
What's the dream? Like, do you, like, as you get bigger, like you're doing Fear and, you work with Valkyrae, are you going to eventually scale yourself out and hire people? Or for you, is it like, no, like it has to be me. I want to always be the guy who's bringing the cameras and have it be a little scuffed.
So this is a question that I actually get very often, just like off camera, just in my life. People will always like mutuals and stuff, usually very like business oriented mutuals will be like, how do you scale this into like a production company?
It's the classic like question, but how do you scale it?
Yeah. And it's a very fair question. I have no plans on doing that because the one I get often is, how do you scale out a production company? And it's like, I don't actually really like doing production that much. I just kind of like do it as a vehicle.
You started on camera.
Exactly. And like I do it because I'm capable, but like I don't want to just like spend all my time doing it.
Yeah.
Like I love doing it for Fear and top to bottom because even though it's a lot of work, I'm an owner of it.
It's so
I'm
baby.
building
you're
it.
Crafting, you're making this.
Exactly. And then for Ray, it's like I love working with Ray so much because Ray kind of made me, for being real. Like,
what do you mean she made you?
Like she put me on. Like Ray put me on. Yeah, for sure. And so I not only feel like indebted to her, but also like I with her a lot. So I even though I'm not like a co-owner of Ray's business, like I feel care. Like exactly like it's something I care about. So it's like fulfilling work still. But that's not to say that I want to just like provide this service for anybody who like is willing to pay.
Yeah, it's not like, hey, I'll give you lots of dollars, produce my podcast. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Like I have to actually care.
And so the other question is like, well, then can you like hire people to do, and like head a production company? You don't actually do it yourself.
Sure.
But then it's like, yeah, I guess I could, but just admittedly, I'm really bad at delegating. Like
same.
Even when it comes to Fear and it's like, there's probably somewhere in there that I could delegate tasks to make my life easier, but I just don't even know what that would look like. And the way that I kind of started my career after my streaming career, started, I guess, my production career, was that I was just like, say yes to every opportunity that comes my way, be as like nimble and flexible as possible, offer as like much white glove service as possible, and just basically say yes to everything. And because of that, I've had to do some really abstract jobs to now where I'm at the point where like when somebody asks like, what's your title? I'm like, I don't know, like producer, creative director, photographer, cinematographer. It's like, I just don't know. Like, I just like, it's very abstract. And so I don't know how to delegate that because in my brain, I haven't compartmentalized each role. They all kind of just like are together.
Yeah, more than anything, you're an owner in the sense that when you work on these things, you care because you feel ownership. And it doesn't matter like the arbitrary delegation of things. You're just going to make sure it gets done. Like, I will get you on this boat. I will record this podcast.
Yeah.
I feel a lot of that myself. So for this, some of you watching, you may or may not know, I'm also co-founder of this company, Karat, that is a venture-backed company that helps creators with their finances.
We love Karat.
And I mean, Marche, I've talked with you about this pretty candidly before. It's really hard because I can't do everything myself.
Yeah.
And I sometimes feel really helpless, especially in cases where, as you know, when you build a relationship with someone and they're asking you to help them with something, you don't want to up.
Yeah.
It's so stressful. The podcast for me has actually become so emotionally important because it's finally something I can just do myself and make.
I can see that.
I know you said Ray made you.
Yeah.
And I've heard you speak before. Like, one of the first things you did for her was like vlogging and producing when she did a collab with Machine Gun Kelly.
Yeah.
Like, that was your first big piece of work.
I specifically, for that one, I wasn't vlogging for her. I was doing photography for her, and Gabe was vlogging for her.
Okay, Gabe was vlogging.
Yeah.
You were doing photography. Had you taken photos before?
No, I had.
So wait, okay, so Hasan and Will Neff come to you to do a podcast, and like so much of this is like relatively new.
Yeah.
You did the 100 Thieves, Courage Nadeshot, had not produced it, period. You're taking photos for Valkyrae. You haven't taken photos before.
Starting to notice a pattern here.
You just do it. Wait, so like, how does this, like, sure, Hutzpah gets you half the way, but like, you have to like take actually photos. Like they can't look bad.
I know. One of them's on a shirt now, which is so sick. I love that shirt so much.
Oh,
but like,
wow. So you took good photos.
Yeah. So the way that happened was, I mean, yeah, exactly. Like there just, I think it's kind of like I just said, like the way I started my career is just say yes to everything, which even includes yes to the things I might not know how to do. And so then just like learning how to do them after the fact. And now it's like, I look back and I'm like, yeah, I can spin up a podcast anywhere. Yeah, I could do photography, whatever. I could like, but it's like in that moment, those are definitely like sink or swim moments where I'm like, okay, we need to figure this out.
Could have gone really badly.
And maybe it comes back to gambling, you know? Isn't that me gambling on the opportunity? Because it could have gone really badly.
You have this like really interesting balance of like, I am anxious and we're all going to die in elevators the next day anyways. So why not gamble? Coupled with this like optimism of, but like, I believe in myself and like, I will not sink. I will swim, with this sprinkling of, and like, these are people I know because I got super drunk with them.
Yeah, you basically summed up me as a person.
This is Marche. For those of you watching, like, how is this guy so good? I feel like you're like Will Neff, Hasan's, like Valkyrae. I feel like you're like their secret weapon.
That's what I'm intending to be. So like I called like I definitely try to be like just again like white glove service, like their Swiss Army knife,
like hidden boss
that they can just kind of count on me for anything, and either I will rise to the occasion, teach myself how to do it, and do it for them, or I will find somebody who will do it for them. So I will also just almost like I'll PA/manage for them in that way too.
So you've learned so many things like photography, podcasting, even streaming, like very early on.
Vlogging.
What do you feel like have been the biggest things you've had to unlearn?
I think the main thing is like unlearning that people who are in positions of authority automatically know best. So that's one thing that I, as early as like high school, right, when I tested out, it's like you have all your teachers and stuff being like, you have to go to college, you have to do this, you have your parents telling you that and stuff, and like, yeah, that's fine, that's true, but like it's like unlearning the part of your brain that's like, oh, that's definitively how it is. They're definitively right because they're older or they're in positions of authority or whatever it may be. They're teachers, they're managers, whatever. So unlearning that, and I've had to unlearn that multiple times in my career when I had these people like basically telling me or like implying heavily that they know what's best or they know the correct way to do things. They know what's better. And that's not to say that like I know better or that they're wrong, but just maybe that's not what's right for me. And so a lot of it's just like trusting myself and like not letting those external kind of like pressures make me doubt myself as much.
Yeah, because like we just spoke a lot about how do you produce a podcast. You would learn a very particular way of doing it at a professional shop.
Exactly.
Like the 100 Thieves production team. And they probably, for everything you had done for Fear, and even that first episode, they probably been like, you're producing on a boat.
Yeah.
It's natural lighting.
They probably look at that podcast and they're like, this is horrible. This looks like this sounds like But at the same time, it's like, you could say that, but I mean, we're making $100K a month on the Patreon. So like, it's like the Courage Nadeshot Show, I mean, we crush them in numbers. Like, it's not a show. And again, that's not to like throw shade or anything like that. I reflect on my time at 100 Thieves very positively. I love all of our talent there. But it just kind of goes back, if anything, that's throwing shade at like the production people who would have those opinions. Yeah. Because it's like, if that's the case, then why am I doing better?
In a way, like talent is talent. Like Courage and Nadeshot are great. In a way, it's almost like the surrounding them in terms of how it's produced and edited. It's like almost, as you said, maybe focusing on the wrong things.
Yes.
Yeah. I had a very similar realization myself because, I don't know, your whole life, you're growing up with people telling you what to do, initially starting off with your parents because they've done things before and they think they know better. But what they fail to recognize is you are going to do things they've never done before in ways they've never done before. Because the world is really different. Like everyone coming from the traditional production environment, like streaming is relatively new. Like you just talked about Ludwig and Hasan and like spotting them when they were still on the come up. This was like within 5 years ago.
I still have those docs too. And they're like dated as like 2018 or 2019.
Like, these guys are going to blow up.
Yeah.
And you know, I asked earlier, why were you ignored? I imagine it's because there was a certain way of how they thought about things. And these two streamers just didn't fit.
There's like a chain
mold.
of command and like the value of someone's opinion differs depending on how high you are on that chain of command, stuff like that.
I remember the biggest mental unlock that helped me go and eventually start a company. I went to a retreat with Instagram leadership. I used to work in Instagram. I worked on products like Instagram Live, and it's some of like the greatest thinkers in the world. Mm-hmm. And we were just like, what do we build next? This had been recently after Stories, which was inspired by Snap.
yes, inspired.
Like, what do we do next? And I remember the head of consumer products turning around and being like, what is Snap doing?
Jesus, that's crazy.
And then asking like, what are kids doing these days? The head of engineering was like, you know, my 14-year-old son, he hosts a lot of these things these days. They're called kickbacks. Not parties, they're kickbacks.
Yeah.
And we all take out our notepads. We're like,
kickbacks.
Question mark. What can we do with that?
Is this a real story? This is crazy.
Yeah. And this isn't meant to throw shade. It's meant to make the point. You'd assume, I assumed you would just know.
Yeah.
But actually, even when you're the best in the world, the reason why Instagram was succeeding is because the people there were humble enough to be like, actually, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's try and figure it out. And then I'm like, well, if they're sitting there going, what's a kickback? This is why startups can succeed. This is why some college student can quit what they're doing and build the next Snap, the next Instagram, because we're all kind of on an equal playing ground.
Yeah, for sure.
I remember too that when we eventually started raising money for Karat, we had a dinner with the co-founder of PayPal. And I was similarly very intimidated. I was like, this guy's going to know everything. I don't know anything. And then halfway through the dinner, I'm like, this guy just like actually just wants to know what's this YouTube thing. He's asking like very basic questions.
Yeah.
He's like, have you thought about like doing merch for YouTubers?
Yeah.
And I want to be like, dude, like everyone does that. Like, this is not like some brilliant idea. He's like, but what if you did this?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the most valuable knowledge is the ones, it's like the pieces of things you've earned yourself, like everything you've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so curious now, you're 28 years old.
Yes.
Your
it's crazy
co-owner.
you knew that off the top of your head.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I'm 32. Like you and I, we've kind of like, we're not old.
No.
But we're also not like.
We're not kids anymore.
We're not kids anymore.
Yeah.
Because I'm curious, when you look back, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, no. Like, there's so many like different answers I could give where it's like, oh yeah, like I wish I had like the foresight to like diversify my content when I was a streamer so like it could have longevity, or like or
You like casually rattle off this like extremely specific.
yeah, or like you know, just be like trusted myself a little more and like been a little more confident, which of course I would have wished I'd done those things. But everything that has happened and everything that I've done and every place that I've been in my career and life has like played some role, to some degree, to getting me to this point. Like even my time like streaming and playing a game that's like now dead, you know, I don't like regret those years I spent there. It's like it taught me how to like do my own live streams. It taught me that like there's a lot of value in live streaming versus professional sports if it's the right community, professional like esports and stuff. Like there are people that I've met through those communities that I still keep in touch with today that have, you know, helped me in some way, or that are just valuable people in my life. So it's like, no, I wouldn't. There's nothing I would like change.
I love that. Let's zoom 10 years out. You're now 38. How do you want to be feeling?
I just want to be at a spot where I am secure in my life, both like mentally and financially, to where I feel enabled and empowered and free to focus on the things that I find most fulfilling, whether that be like going and doing things that I like doing, like, you know, traveling or going to see like live music, or like investing in the hobbies that actually like fulfill my soul. It's like just basically having like that security and comfort to just do the things that fulfill me versus feeling like I need to, or pressure to do this thing that I don't necessarily want to be investing my limited time on, I guess.
Are there a lot of things you still feel that pressure to do that you don't necessarily love or feel inspired by?
A lot less nowadays.
Okay, makes sense.
A lot less. It's like year over year, it's become less, and I'm hoping that it continues trending that way. But it's like, I mean, the beginning of this time last year, I was still at 100 Thieves, and near the tail end of my time there, it definitely became like a good job where I was like dreading like waking up for this shoot or going in the office for this day, and I was like, it felt like that like cog in the machine kind of like soul crushing vibe, and I haven't really felt that nearly as much. I think the main thing too is like probably the most valuable thing, and streaming, again, going back to like why I wouldn't change things, is because like streaming gave me my own autonomy over my time, even though it was so tough and there were months where I was like, I'm not gonna be able to pay rent this month, and I was getting gut punched and stuff. I was still doing it on my own schedule. Whereas 100 Thieves, it's like I'm at this like what some people would say is like a cushy job, even though
prestigious.
I was not making that much money, but I was making enough money for rent. But like externally, people would always like tell me like, oh, like your job's so cool. We work at 100 Thieves, like this cool org in esports, and they were the cool org for a while. But like it didn't feel that way. It felt like, and then it made me realize like if I'm not happy or fulfilled in this salary position, which is a cushy esports job, then the thing that I find the most valuable is just autonomy over my time. Like I can be more broke or whatever, but if I can just like do things on my own calendar, my own schedule, whenever I feel like doing them, that is so much more valuable, and it's harder to quantify that into a dollar amount than like having the job security, for me at least. Like there are some people that are like type A people that want the structure and the organization, but I've never been that way. And so going back after the 100 Thieves thing, there has been like some periods of uncertainty, like with starting Fear End. I didn't know if that was ever going to pay out or anything. But even though those were really stressful moments, I was still like, I have autonomy over my time. You know, I'm not clocking in for a boss or an office job or whatever.
I love that. Yeah. That's a wrap.
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
Good.
You killed it.
Thanks. Wait, did we stop?
Yeah.